but in this case the GCF is 1. Now since the GCF is 1, you then ask yourself, how many terms do you see? 4. If you see 4 terms, what are you going to try grouping? For us, right now, grouping the first 2 and the last 2 should work. In the first group, what is the GCF of the first group? Look at 4x cubed and negative 12x squared. 4x squared. So if I factor out the 4x squared, what goes inside the parentheses? 4x squared times what is 4x cubed? Or x, right?
Yeah, x minus.
Minus, and then 4x squared times what's a negative 12x squared? 3. And always check yourself. Distribute. 4x squared times x is 4x cubed. 4x squared times a negative 3 is a negative 12x squared. From the second group, remember, you're always going to factor out that middle sign. So you're going to factor out a positive GCF. What is the GCF of the second group? 7. So he's 7 times what? 7 times what is 7x? 7 times what's a negative 21? Negative 3. If you're doing this correctly, those two things you have inside the parentheses should be the same. So what's the GCF of those groups? X minus 3. So you're going to factor out an x minus 3, and then what's your answer? X minus 3 times what? 4x squared plus 7. So that's your answer. So remember, factoring means to rise a product, and so I did. I wrote this polynomial that have 4 terms as a product of 2 binomials. All right, number 2. You have y cubed minus 3y squared minus 2y plus 6. What's the GCF? 1. GCF is 1. So then we're going to group the first 2. First of all, how many terms do you see? 4. So when you see 4 terms, you want to try grouping. So again, we're going to try grouping the first 2, the last 2. At some point, we're going to look at problems where that group does not work. So we would have to switch terms around. But for us right now, it should work. What's the GCF of that first group?
Y squared.
Y squared. Times what?
Y minus 3.
Y minus 3. All right, now remember, you always take out that middle sign. So I'm going to take out a negative GCF. What's the GCF of that second group? I'm going to factor out a negative what? 2. And then what's left? Y minus 3. Now always check. A negative 2 times y is a negative 2y. A negative 2 times a negative 3 is a positive 6. So if you put a plus 3, you knew something was wrong to begin with, because those two things you have in parentheses would not be the same. Secondly, that if you had put a plus 3 here, a negative 2 times a positive 3 gives you a negative 6. What'd you want? Positive 6. All right, and so therefore, what's the answer? What's the GCF of those two groups? Y minus 3. So what's the answer?
Y minus 3 times y squared minus 2.
Okay, so that's the answer. All right, number 3. All right, number 3, you have 8x squared plus 20x minus 6x minus 15. So 8x squared plus 20x minus 6x minus 15. All right, what's the GCF? 1. GCF is 1. How many terms?
4.
So we're going to try grouping. So again, let's try the first group and the last group. From the first group, what's the GCF?
4x.
4x. 4x times what?
X plus 5.
4x times x is 4x squared.
Oh, 2x.
2x, right? 2x plus what? 5. Check yourself by distributing. 4x times 2x is 8x squared. 4x times 5 is 20x. From the second group, what do you factor out? Negative 3. The middle sign. Make sure you're careful with that. You are going to have one in your test in which the middle sign's negative. Negative 3 times what? Okay, and then negative 3 times what's negative 15? Positive 5. All right, now from these two groups, what is the GCF? Okay, so I'm going to get 2x plus 5 times what? And there's your answer. So you factored that polynomial. So you wrote a product. And if you look at those factors, there's nothing else you can do with them. Number 4. Suppose in number 4, we had this. We had 6x squared plus 12x minus 9x minus 18. So 6x squared plus 12x minus 9x minus 18. All right. What's the GCF? 3. This time you have a GCF. So again, you really need to look for that GCF. It does help. So the GCF is 3, so I'm going to factor out the 3. In the past, since the GCF was 1, I didn't do anything with that GCF because it was 1. Now the GCF is 3. So you're going to say 3 times, and then whatever needs to be inside that parentheses. 3 times what? 6x squared? 2x squared. 3 times what is 12x? 4x. 3 times what's a negative 9x? So negative 3x, and then minus 6, is that correct?
Yep.
So far I have 3 times 2x squared plus 4x minus 3x minus 6. All right, remember a factor means or as a product. You might say, well, I have it now written as a product. 3 times these 4 things. Yeah, but you got to remember, you have to factor completely. So what's inside the parentheses right here? 2x squared plus 4x minus 3x minus 6. You guys see if you can do anything else to that. Well, how many terms do you see? 4. Now make sure the GCF is 1. This has to be 1 now, right? Because you took out the GCF, which was 3. So what's left should be a GCF of 1, and it is. Just as before when we did 1, 2, and 3, you can group the first 2, group the last 2. From the first group, what's the GCF? 2x times what?
4.
X plus what? 4. No, 2x times 4 is 8x. 2, right? 2x times x is 2x squared. 2x times 2 is 4x. From the second group, what are you going to factor out? A negative 3x? Just 3. 6 doesn't have an x. So negative 3 times what, though? What's in goes out of the parentheses? X plus 2. Because negative 3 times x, negative 3x. Negative 3 times a positive 2 is a negative 6. If you do this correctly, those two should be the same. So I'm going to factor out the x plus 2. And what do you end up with? 2x minus 3. Now, a mistake people make is that in the blank, on the worksheet, there's a blank. They're going to say the answer is x plus 2 times 2x minus 3. But remember that this right here, you factored from this. Was that the original problem? No, the original problem was this. So what am I missing in this blank? The GCF of 3. So don't forget to bring that down. So there's your answer. Okay, now, just want to say something. You could have, although, you remember, every time we factor, we always ask ourselves, what's the GCF? But it is possible, I'm going to put this as 4-star right here. It is possible in that same problem that some of you will have forgotten about the GCF to look for. And so some of you are going to go directly to grouping. You're going to say, I'm going to group the first two, the last two. All right, no big deal. Let's do that. From the first group, what can you factor out? 3x is not the largest. 6x. In fact, out of 6x. Times what?
2x. Oh, sorry, x. Yeah.
X, right?
Yeah, x.
Plus
3.
2. Yo, I'm going to have to bring multiplication tables.
Sorry.
All right, 6x times x is 6x squared. 6x times 2 is 12x. From the second group, what can you factor out?
9. Negative 9.
Negative 9. Times what?
Times 2.
Negative 9 times what is negative 9x?
Times x.
X. Negative 9 times what is a negative 18?
And the positive
Positive 2 plus 2, right? Notice these two things are the same. So I get x plus 2 times what?
times 6x minus 9.
All right, so that's where I'm at. Okay? Now remember, you need to factor completely. What do you notice about this factor right here that I'm pointing to?
There's a common factor.
They have a common factor. Other than 1, what is that common factor? 3. So you need to go further. That's why it's always best to factor it out at the beginning. Because if you don't, you do this and you're going to forget about the fact that this has a common factor of 3, and you're going to say that's the answer and you won't get your full credit. Because you can still factor this. What do they have in common? What do they have in common right here? A 3. So that becomes 3 times what?
X minus
3. Y'all having problems multiplying. 3 times 3 is 9. Okay, now notice how many factors do you see all together?
2x.
Huh?
2x minus 3.
Oh, 2x. Okay, thank you. Well, I can't say anything about y'all now. 2x. 3 times 2x is 6x. All right, how many factors do you see all together? X plus 2 is a factor. What is another factor you see?
3.
3. What is another factor you see? 2x minus 3. We tend to put the monomial factor first. So this is going to become 3 times x plus 2 times 2x minus 3, which is the same as this one.
So
Okay.
no matter where you work it, it'll be the same.
Well, the problem is that, notice that for many of you that factor out the 3 first, you would have gotten this and you would have gotten the answer correct. For many of you that did it this way, you would have forgotten about this 3 right here. And you would have said this is the answer and you would have been very upset because you would not have received your full credit. Because you didn't factor completely. You still have a common factor of what in here? A 3. It's kind of like that first worksheet that you had to turn in that said something like this: factor 6x minus 12. Kind of like this, 6x minus 9. How did you factor 6x minus 12? That was one of the easy ones on that worksheet. What'd you do? Oh, Lord. Come on, guys. What'd you do? How'd you factor 6x minus 12? That's on your test.
Oh,
No, one person can tell me how to factor that?
6 is your greatest common factor.
Your GCF is 6. So what's the answer?
X minus 2.
X minus 2 is the answer?
Oh, 6.
6 times x minus 2. That's that idea here. All right, so again, notice that you struggle with this one. That's an easy kind. All right, number 5. All right, we have 6x squared minus 9x minus 2xy plus 3y. So 6x squared minus 9x minus 2xy plus 3y. All right, what's the GCF? 1. How many terms do you see? 4. So try grouping. The first group, what's the GCF? It's just 3? 3x. And you get 3x times what?
2x
2x
negative 3.
minus 3. 3x times 2x is 6x squared. 3x times negative 3 is a negative 9x. From the second group, what can you factor out?
Y.
Just a positive y, negative y? Negative y. Take out the middle sign. What are you left with?
Minus 3.
Minus 3. Because a negative y times 2x is a negative 2xy. A negative y times a negative 3 is a positive 3y. If you do this correctly, those things inside the parentheses should be the same. So what's the answer?
2x minus 3 times 3x.
Yeah, so that's the answer. So 2x minus 3 times 3x minus y. Right. Okay, let's look at number 6. So number 6, suppose you had 16x cubed plus 40x squared minus 12x squared minus 30x. So 16x cubed plus 40x squared minus 12x squared minus 30x. What do you do first? GCF. What's the GCF? Huh?
4x.
4 goes into 30 evenly? 2. Okay, I agree with 2. What else? 2x. GCF is 2x. So you can say 2x times, all right, 2x times what is 16x cubed? 8x squared. 2x times what's 40x squared?
20x.
Plus 20x. And then 2x times what's a negative 12x squared?
Negative 6x. Or minus 6x.
Negative 6x. And then minus 15. Okay.
That 8,
Huh?
that 8 would be a square. Oh, yeah. Never mind. I thought that was a 16x squared.
Okay. All right. Now, am I done?
No.
No, you got to see if you can do anything else with what's inside that parentheses. How many terms do you see inside that parentheses? 4. So let's try grouping. So I have 8x squared plus 20x minus 6x minus 15. Now notice I already took out the GCF, right? So this right here, the GCF of what was inside the parentheses should be a 1 now, and it is. The only common factor they have in common here is the number 1, these 4 terms. Okay, we're going to group the first 2, group the last 2. What kind of group, or what can I factor out the first group? 4x? And what are you left with?
2x plus 5.
2x what?
Plus 5.
Plus 5? Okay, I agree with that. From the second group, what are you going to factor out? A negative 3. And negative 3 times what will give me a negative 6x minus 15?
2x plus 5.
2x plus 5. You know, always check. A negative 3 times 2x is a negative 6x. A negative 3 times a positive 5 is a negative 15. What do you notice about these two groups? They have the same GCF. So the GCF of both groups is what? 2x plus 5. And then you got 2x plus 5 times what? 4x minus 3. And so that though is the factorization of this polynomial. But the original was this one. So this right here, see that I'm underlining right here? That is the answer for this one, right? But what else is being multiplied by this? 2x. So the answer is going to be 2x times what? 2x plus 5 times 4x minus 3. Okay? All right, let's do one more, number 7. Suppose number 7, we have this. We have 192 x squared y plus 72 x cubed minus 24 r, that's an r, x y minus 9 r x squared. So those are r's right here. So minus 24 rxy and then minus 9 rx squared. All right. What's the GCF? Do the coefficients first. 192, 72, 24, 9. What's the GCF?
Is that 72?
72. What do y'all think? 3? 3 goes with all of those. 3x, because there's an x in all of them, right? Is r going to be in the GCF? No, because there's not an r in all of them. But this has 2 factors of x. This has 3. This has how many factors of x? And this has how many factors of x? So use how many? The one with the smallest exponent. So the GCF is 3x. So you're going to, just like we did this one, you're going to say 3x times. Now notice I'm using a bracket here, it does not matter. Here I use parentheses, here I use brackets, does not matter. So 3x times what though? 3 times what is 192? Use your calculator. 64? All right. 3x times what is 192x squared y though? xy, good. Plus 3 times what's 72? What is it, 24 you said? 24? X times what's x cubed? X squared. Okay. 3x, well, 3 times what's 24? Yes, it would be minus 8. All right, factor out the x, so what's left though? ry, good. Minus 3x times what's 9r x squared? 3r x. Y'all agree? All right. So there are a lot of variables floating around, so make sure you're careful with them. And always check yourself. 3x times a negative 3rx. 3 times a negative 3 is a negative 9. X times x is x squared, and then you have that r. Okay, now again, just like in number 6, you want to take what's inside that bracket or parentheses, so you use parentheses, and you want to see if you can factor it further. Okay, that's an rx right here. That's 3rx. All right, first group, last group. What can I factor out that first group? No, you're going to do more than that. Can you do more than that? 8. Okay, so some of you said no, right? All right, so let's see if you had used 4, if you would have recognized that what you said was incorrect. So I'm going to go ahead and do a 4. I'm going to go ahead and rewrite this. Let's just show you what you're supposed to then realize. So I'm going to do a 4. So you said 4x though, right? The x you should have all said. So 4x times what is 64xy? 16. So 16y plus 4x times what's 24x squared? Not 8. 6x, right? I want you to notice this right here. What do you notice about these two terms? They have a common factor. What's that common factor? A 2. Just like when we did this one earlier right here, there's a common factor. What's that common factor? 3. So you factor it out. So you could have factored out a 2, and what would be left in here?
8y,
8y plus
3,
3x. So then you would have said, what's 4x times 2? 8x. So the GCF was not 4x. The GCF should have been what? 8x. So you can take out an 8x. And 8x times what? Huh? 8 times what is 64?
Y plus 3.
So 8y, right? Plus 8x times what is 24x squared? 3x. All right. From the second group, what can I factor out? Negative, not y, but what? R. And that becomes 8y. A negative r times what is a negative 3rx?
3x, negative 3x.
Okay, he said negative 3x, right? I didn't mean right, but that's what he said. A negative times a negative is a positive. I wanted a negative, so it can't be negative 3x. It has to be what? Positive 3x. And then you notice that what's inside the parentheses are the same now. So that becomes 8y plus 3x times what? 8x minus r. All right, now that right here that I'm circling, that is just this that I'm underlining. So what's the answer to the problem?
3x times
The GCF. Don't forget the GCF. You got to bring that GCF down. That's the GCF. And then what's the answer? 3x times what?
8y plus 3x times 8x.
8x minus r. Now, remember, the order in which you multiply doesn't matter because, remember, multiplication is commutative. Could someone have said 3x times 8x minus r times 8y plus 3x? Yes, they could have. Multiplication, you can multiply in any order. All right, so that was number 7. Okay? All right, so that's going to take care of that worksheet.